Welcome back, all you amazing Met fans. This is Optimistic Met Fan, a show hosted by a diehard Met fan. I am Frank Garsberger, and today we're going to be catching you guys up on the Mets. They just got back from a road trip where they went 500. So a little bit disappointing. But again, when you go 500 on the road, you can't complain. So we're going to dive into that really quick, and then we're going to talk about the upcoming homestand, and then see where we go from there. But I just want to remind you guys to follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and as well as you can watch me on YouTube and Spotify. So please hit that like button and hit that subscribe button as well if you guys haven't already. Want to thank everybody who has already subscribed and who continues to subscribe. So the Mets went to Sacramento this past weekend to play the Athletics. Kind of weird that we're talking about the A's in Sacramento, so used to being in Oakland. But they will be going to Vegas, so that'll be pretty exciting. Um, and it was kind of weird seeing the Mets playing a minor league ballpark against the Athletics. A lot of the broadcast was kind of teasing, not really poking fun, but teasing at the fact that, a lot of the clubhouse stuff was in left field. So a lot of players you'd see in between innings on TV kind of running through the outfield into the facilities there to do batting practice and just keep you know warm and ready to go whenever they were needed. It was kind of weird seeing that, but it was kind of funny too because Gary and Ron were poking fun at it. I thought that was pretty amusing watching the games over the weekend. But as far as the series went, I thought the Mets played pretty good. The bats started to get going. They kind of having trouble scoring runs, and the fact that they were able to get a lot of runs in this series, at least in two of the wins, was encouraging. My only issue was, again, just leaving guys on base. That's been their issue all year, really. But in the first game, we had, of course, Mr. Pete Alonso starting it off. This guy just keeps hitting for power, especially with the RBIs and the home runs. Hit another home run in the first game on Friday, and then Nemo also contributed with a home run. He actually had two home runs in the series. That was pretty nice to see from Brendan Nemo. Um, Griffin Canning, a guy who we didn't think was going to be a good starter for the Mets, is actually one of the better ones on this staff right now. And that's kind of encouraging to see that. I hope that it continues. He picked up a win on Friday night. He cruised through 5 innings and then went into the sixth. Mendoza's trying to stretch these guys out a little bit, see what they can handle. And Griffin Canning kind of hit a wall in the sixth inning. Again, the Athletics have some good hitters, so I'm not really going to fault Mendoza for keeping Canning in the game. But at the same time, you know, Griffin Canning was able to, battle through 5 innings. I thought he looked good. This is really encouraging from him. Other than that, from Griffin Canning, I really don't think I was that disappointed. He, again, with the defense too, they've been getting some errors lately, so that's going to happen. But again, a good win by the Mets on Friday night. I didn't like Diaz giving us a heart attack in the ninth inning. He needs to really stop that. But again, a good Met win for Friday night. 7-6 was the final. Should have been a little bit easier, but of course, Diaz doesn't do that. Diaz always likes to give us a little bit of a heart attack. Um, but as Met fans, we're kind of used to that, right? We hear the trumpets, we get all excited, and then, it's a roller coaster ride to get the last three outs. But, it was encouraging that he was able to battle through. But again, it's just weird with Diaz. Just to touch on that really quick before I highlight the rest of the series. It's good that he could battle through the inning, but it's something weird with him, and it's happened all year long. I'm going to touch on the fact that he did it again uh, during this road trip, and then again at home, the first game at homestand that they just finished tonight. Um, again, he just starts off innings sloppy, walks or doesn't have his control and gives up a hit, gets guys on base, but then all of a sudden he finds it, and it's really weird. It's like I don't know if he just needs to have guys on base, Diaz, to really lock in. It would be nice to have a 1, 2, 3 inning for a change to get a save, but it's encouraging that he can still dial it up when he needs to, and he settles in. The second game of this series, the Mets lost 3-1. It was a really good pitching matchup. The Met bats again had guys on base; they couldn't get them in. Uh, and then Kodai Senga in the final game, and I wanted to really talk about the third game because I was texting back and forth with a buddy of mine. Shout out to El Flo. Uh, you know who you are, buddy. I love you. Wanted to give a shout out to him because me and him spoke a lot during the offseason about how we thought Kodai Senga was going to bounce back, and he just needed to stay healthy. But this was the first game, and it was a really good sign because he went 7 innings on 77 pitches, didn't give up any runs, and the Mets bats came alive. Uh, Midway through the game on Luis Severino and the Oakland bullpen, they ended up winning 8-0. It kind of got away from the Athletics in the eighth and ninth inning. The Mets just kept piling on hits. It was good to see Beatty, the Mets, beleaguered. I say beleaguered because, he just he tries, but it's just this guy really needs a break. He finally broke through with a triple in the final game and got an RBI. That was really nice to see by Brett Beatty. But again, to piggyback back on Kodai Senga, he went 7 innings on 77 pitches. Okay, that's really hard to do in the major leagues, especially against a lineup like the Athletics. They have a lot of good hitters, and it was really encouraging to see him in his third start go 7 innings. I would have liked to have seen him go a little bit deeper into this game, but again, I think they have a plan. I trust Mendoza and Hefner with, at least the pitching staff on, total pitches in the game. I think they have a game plan with Senga. Have him go 80 pitches, see how long he goes, and then probably extend him. It was really encouraging that he was able to go 7 innings. This guy's a forgotten guy. In 2023, Kodai Senga was the best pitcher on the Mets staff. And he got forgotten last year because he was hurt all year, and then came back, and really shouldn't have came back. He tried to come back in the playoffs and just wasn't the same guy. But again, I can't fault him for that. You know, I thought it was really encouraging to see him want to go out there in the playoffs and help the Mets win. And this year, it's been really, really good to see him and his progression and what he's been able to do. We really need Kodai Senga to be the ace of the staff right now because right now, other than Kodai Senga, I don't think we really have one. I mean, everybody keeps saying Sean Manaea, but Sean Manaea is a really good number 3 starter, to be honest. And that's okay. I think that if the Mets could pull off a trade for somebody later in the year, this staff is going to be unreal. You're going to have Kodai Senga doing his thing. You're going to have Sean Manaea hopefully back in late May, early June. And then, we'll roll. I think this team has a lot of good pitchers. I want to bring up again that this pitching staff and what Jeremy Hefner and Mendoza are doing with this pitching staff is incredible. They still, as of tonight, have the major league best ERA in baseball. The best ERA. Not the best in the National League, the best in all of baseball. I want to kind of drive that point home, and I'm trying to drive that home because the Mets really, were considered a good team, but not a great team because of their starting pitching. That's all we heard during the offseason was, oh, this team has great hitting because they got Juan Soto and they have all these other hitters. We have the best pitching staff in baseball because we just know how to get through a game, and I think Jeremy Hefner really deserves his flowers for this because he manages the staff really well. And you don't need an ace to get through 162 games. You just need an ace in the playoffs. And really, I mean, ace gets thrown around a lot in baseball. I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. There's really not a lot of aces in baseball to begin with. Everybody says, "Oh yeah, this is a team ace." Not really. I mean, there's a lot of teams that don't even have an ace. In my opinion, I think there's maybe five. You can really say as an ace. A guy that you can count on and say, okay, this game's already won before it started. Obviously, I'll mention a few offhand. You got Zach Wheeler. I consider him an ace. I consider, you know, uh, probably Garrett Cole. I'll give him credit. He's an ace. And there's a few that I'm probably missing because I kind of, just jumped into that. But again, that's my point. If I can't, off the top of my head, say that this guy's an ace, then there's really not a lot of aces in baseball. Maybe Paul Skeens, but Paul Skeens is a second-year pro. He was a rookie last season. Okay, is he really an ace? You need longevity too before you can be called an ace, in my opinion. You need to do it a couple of years in a row. So, again, there's only a handful out there, you know? So, again, on this team, Kodai Senga is the ace. But is he really an ace? I think he's really more number two. But that's, a debate, that I hope, and again, in the comments, you guys shoot your opinion. I don't think the Mets really have an ace. I think that, Kodai Senga is really more of a number two, and that's okay. But again, I mean, I was really happy with the way he pitched this past Sunday, and his next start is going to be against St. Louis on Saturday at home. So let's hope he continues his great start. Then the Mets went to Minnesota, and again, uh, I always kind of criticize Major League Baseball for their scheduling because the Mets have been getting trolled online about how they've had an easy schedule. But, my issue with the scheduling has been you go from playing Sacramento in 80-degree weather, and then you have the Mets go to Minnesota in 30 to 40-degree weather. I mean, come on. Are you kidding me? Juan Soto and Brandon Nimmo had hoodies during the games. That's how cold it was. So, I'm not saying that that's why the Mets lost 2 out of 3 against Minnesota, but again, the weather can't help. I mean, come on. We could have faced Minnesota a little bit later in the year, but that being what it was, the Mets did win the first game, and Mr. Juan Soto did hit his second home run of the year, the first game of the series on Monday. Mets won 5-1. Clay Holmes got his second win. Clay Holmes again went into the sixth inning, didn't finish. Would have been nice, but again, I'm not gonna really hold him to that. I mean, it's a transition from the bullpen to being in a starter rotation. I do like the strikeouts and the fact that he's showing that there's something there. So that's encouraging for a lot of Met fans, including myself. I'm very high on Clay Holmes. I think Clay Holmes is going to do a really good job. Which just, again, it's 2 weeks into the season, 2.5 weeks into the season. I'm not going to, critique guys too much. I think that, again, as the year goes on, these pitchers are going to be, given a longer leash and, the pitching count will go up a little bit. But we also have to protect guys like Clay Holmes and guys like Griffin Canning because I think if you push them too hard, you could definitely have these guys fall off a little bit of a cliff. And we don't want that. I think that Mendoza kind of learned his lesson last year of, pushing guys a little too hard. So it's nice to see him kind of pull back a little bit and give these guys a little bit of a break early on in April. And that's kind of, how it's been with the Mets. The second 2 games of this series weren't very good offensively. They just got outplayed by the Minnesota Twins pitching staff. So you tip your cap to them. But again, it's all very inconsistent in this series. It looked like they were turning a corner as far as, going to Sacramento and scoring all those runs and looking really good. And then the first game, you win 5-1. And then obviously, they hit a wall Tuesday. And then Wednesday afternoon, it was a well played game, uh, at least late in the game for the New York Mets. Got to tip your cap to the Minnesota Twins. Uh, you know, I've said that a couple times now, but it's true. Harrison Bader, especially, um, former Met from last season, miss him, miss his hustle. You saw it in this series what his hustle can bring to a team. It, in my opinion, won the series for the Minnesota Twins. Uh, again, they just made more plays. That's really all it came down to. There was a situation in the game where the Mets probably, before the extra innings happened, could have won 3-2. They were losing 3-0 basically because of Jose Butto, one of the Mets relievers. He did step on the bag at first base and got the out. This was a controversial play that led to a run. But again, as Keith said, you got to keep your head in the game. And, the runner wouldn't have came home from third if Jose Butto was paying attention and made the right play. Uh, Again, I like players that wear their emotions on their sleeve, but you kind of have to control it a little bit. That did cost the Mets a run, and ultimately cost them the game. There was a couple other issues that in that game that cost them the game. Obviously, Juan Soto came up with the bases loaded earlier in the game in the fifth inning, grounded out into a double play. So again, a lot of mishaps in the third game of this series, which is why we finished at 500 instead of winning 4 out of 6. But again, it's April, and these things are going to happen. These are things that you can clean up as a team. So I'm not really going to punish the Mets or be too critical. Again, try to look at the positive here on this podcast at the optimistic Met fan. But again, when, it calls for it, I'm going to be objective and I'm going to call it like I see it. But again, pretty happy about a 3-3 road trip. 500 on the road is really good because you look to be above 500 at home. So this is really good early on. At least they're going, or at least they went back home in first place at, a record of 11-7. That's really good compared to what they did last season. Again, they had a terrible start to the season last season. So this is really encouraging that even with a little bit of the mishaps and stuff that, we want to critique on this show, it's good to know that the Mets are in first place. There's a lot more positives than negatives. So that's really good. Again, 3-3 road trip, really not that bad. And then, let's talk a little bit about a couple of guys who have been standing out this season before we go into the homestand that was started on Thursday night against St. Louis. The players that have been standing out for me haven't even really been. I mean, everybody keeps saying Pete Alonso, Pete Alonso. Yes, Pete Alonso's been amazing so far. 5 home runs, 20 RBIs, all that good stuff. 350 average. Can't talk enough about Pete Alonso. However, one of the unsung heroes of this team so far has been a Mr. Luis Torrens, catcher of the New York Mets. He had to step up because there's obviously Alvarez on the IL right now, and Hayden Senger's the backup. Actually, even Hayden Senger, I have to give him some credit because this has been a really good tandem for the New York Mets. Really a strength of the team. Most notably because, like I said earlier, the ERA being the best in baseball. That's because of these two guys, and all the hard work they've put in, especially Luis Torrens, who's really an underrated guy. I know my group chat, my fantasy league, a couple of guys have said that Luis Torrens reminds them of how like Paul Lo Duca used to be on the New York Mets. I don't know if you guys remember. Paul Lo Duca was kind of a scrappy catcher, just did everything kind of well, but not great. And Luis Torrens, you have to give him his flowers here because he's making some really good hits. having really good professional at bats, not really getting cheated, and he's throwing guys out. And I don't know why guys keep trying to steal on this guy. He has over, I think they said in tonight's game at Citi Field, they had a graphic that said he was 43%, him and Kodai Senga throwing out runners. That's unbelievable, especially when I point out that the league average is 20%. So the Met catchers are doubling what the league average is. That's pretty impressive. And, it's only going to get better once Francisco Alvarez comes back, obviously. And then you make a move, knowing that you have Hayden Senger in AAA once Francisco Alvarez comes back is really a good thing because, you want that depth and you want to know that you could have a strength at certain positions. It's a shame that Hayden Senger is going to have to be sent down once Francisco Alvarez comes up. But also, I wanted to give Luis Torrens his credit because I don't think that he immediately goes to the bench once Francisco Alvarez comes back. I think this is a 50-50 split, maybe 60-40. And I would even give Luis Torrens more starts at this point. Make Francisco Alvarez kind of earn his spot back, at least starting every day. Obviously, if Francisco Alvarez is hitting, obviously give him more starts. I'm not saying just automatically make it a 50-50 split, but it's a good problem to have when these guys play really well. And then obviously these guys that are on the IL, like Alvarez, another guy on the IL, Jeff McNeil coming back. But both of these guys are in rehab right now in the minor leagues. So they're rehabbing, getting their at bats. They're looking pretty good. Both of them should be back once they, ramp up some activity down there and prove that they can play multiple days and, everything's looking good and they're not getting injured. Uh, you know, they haven't really said when these guys are going to come back, but if they're in the minor leagues having pretty good starts, you could imagine that they're going to be back pretty soon, which leads me into talking about Luis Angel Acuna and Brett Beatty. Maybe with the injury to Jose Siri, uh, even though they brought up Jose Azocar to be the backup outfielder for Jose Siri, maybe one of these guys or both could stay. I don't really know if Luis Angel Acuna and Beatty are both going to stay. Brett Beatty really is the odd man out right now, in my opinion, even though I've been rooting for Brett Beatty. He's at least now starting to hit the last couple of games, but I think it's a little too late. It's plain to see that the impact player out of the two is Acuna. Another reason why I think Acuna might stay is because he's played the outfield in the minor leagues. That could actually help. Um, because obviously, you don't want Tyrone Taylor to play every single day. Uh, his offense will get exposed. But again, center field is more of a defensive position these days anyway. But having all these options, and they did say that Jeff McNeil, interesting enough, might play some center field. I think he can do it, but at the same time, I'd rather just have Tyrone Taylor, and it's really intriguing to me to see, at least to keep him in the lineup, having Acuna play some outfield. So I think that's something that they're looking at. And then, of course, the flexibility with Jeff McNeil would be awesome, but I'd rather see Jeff McNeil play second base. Uh, as far as uh, other guys, I really don't see other guys being moved or coming up right now. I think the team is pretty much set. The Jose Siri injury really forced the Mets to make a move, even though I don't think they really wanted to. They were kind of set with their team. And that's really good because, the depth of this team is just incredible. And you see they even had a spot start with this guy Hangerman in the Twin Series also. He came up and pitched a little bit. And I was happy to see that. That was pretty cool. He's a decent depth guy. We might see him again because he was successful. But again, I mean, I would rather them just stick with who they have. If they're going to go to a bullpen game every once in a while, that's cool. Because you have Brazabon who can go multiple innings. You have Kranick, and you have Jose Buteau that could go multiple innings. So really, you don't need to bring anybody up yet. I'm glad they didn't rush Brendan Sproat. Uh, that was something that I didn't want to see. Even though he's the top prospect, let him get his feet wet and let him progress. So I think all is well and good with the New York Mets right now with their roster. They don't need to make too many moves, and that's really a good thing. And then later down the line in spring, in July, if you want to make a trade, you have all this minor league depth that you could kind of dangle, and you can maybe get a nice piece. But until then, I kind of like the way this lineup's going to go, especially with McNeil and Alvarez coming back. Back end of this lineup really needs some help, and I think even though we're kind of sluggish with the hitting, and we're kind of back and forth with the hitting, I think that once these guys come back, the lineup is going to be so deep that something's going to have to give, and I think that we're going to see some fireworks at Citi Field. I think that this lineup's going to go. Speaking of the lineup and their woes, I just want to kind of, before I go into this last game that the Mets had at home against St. Louis, this lineup is going to hit. So I really have to, and I love listening to radio shows. I love listening to different shows on online, different websites. The New York media got to chill, all right? Because criticizing Juan Soto for a so-called slow start to other people's standards uh, is kind of ridiculous. I mean, the guy has 3 home runs. I understand he doesn't have a lot of RBIs, but he's scoring runs. He's getting a lot of walks. He's being productive in other ways, and he's not killing us on defense. So he's even playing pretty good defense in right field. I'm not going to say it's Gold Glove defense, but he's definitely not costing us games. And you know, saying that, oh, this is not what $765 million gets you. We need to see him do more offensively. It's 2 weeks into the season. Let's take a chill pill. I think this offense is going to be just fine. You got Pete Alonso raking right now. You got Mark Vientos, who is waking up offensively. Brandon Nemo is kind of up and down right now, but again, he's even been getting his hits every once in a while. Lindor hasn't had such a slow start this year, so that's encouraging. The New York media got to chill. It's like we're in first place, and they're still not happy. So I don't really know what to say about that. But, I think the New York media needs to do better. Uh, New York Mets are in first place, and all is well and good in orange and blue land. So the Mets did have a game tonight. Going to close the show talking about that. They won 4-1 against the St. Louis Cardinals, and Griffin Canning yet again pitched really, really, really well. Matter of fact, this was probably his coming out party. This start, 6 innings. More importantly, he gave up 1 run, had 8 strikeouts, and went 6 innings. And the 2 things that stood out to me was not only did he go into the 6th inning for the first time this year, but he went over 100 pitches. The first Met pitcher, at least starting pitcher, to go 100 pitches. That's extremely encouraging, especially for a guy like Griffin Canning. So again, he's been another guy that kind of stood out to me. Definitely the player of the game today. Even though Lindor had 3 hits, they were all singles. But again, Lindor did have a great play today. That's not going to go into the scorecard. The Mets had that 4-run second inning rally against the St. Louis starter. Everybody from the back end got hit. So Beatty, Taylor, then Lindor came up, got a single, made it 3-0, and then on the throw home, he tried to go to second. Now, he did get caught up at second base, but before getting tagged out, he smartly, and actually this was more because St. Louis made a mental mistake. So before I, you know, say that it was such a great play by the Mets, it was just a heads up play by the Mets where they took advantage of St. Louis's poor defense, where instead of quickly throwing it to second and cutting off Lindor and tagging him out, they started running around a little bit and had their back to Tyrone Taylor, who was able to run from third base all the way home. And all you saw on TV was Lindor kind of knowing what the situation was, and he was waving. He was waving on. You see my hand there. That's the gesture that Francisco Lindor was doing. He was kind of waving, kind of being a third base coach on that play, and I thought that was really a cool highlight. Even though it doesn't come out in the box score, you might see it in the highlights if you watch SNY. I'm sure they'll bring it up. Uh, Again, I thought that was really just a heads up play. Goes to show you that he, is going to sacrifice himself to get the job done. He could have easily ran to second base and not waved home Tyrone Taylor. Now, yes, Tyrone Taylor, was hustling as well, but again, just seeing how Francisco Lindor's leadership uh, has been progressing is just really impressive. So, we're 12-7. We're doing really well. I'm really happy with the way this team is coming along, and let's get them tomorrow. Again, this is early on in the season. I think that New York media is going to spin what they want to spin. But as long as we keep winning games, uh, eventually they're going to have to talk about what the reality is, and that's that the New York Mets are a playoff contender, they're a division contender for the National League East, and they're a World Series contender. So as long as we keep doing what we got to do, uh, I'm sure that the New York media will wake up. But until then, this is the optimistic Met fan. Thank you for joining me today. Have a great night. Love you guys. Let's go Mets. And I will see you guys next week. All right.